Shalom. This is ben-Emmett with another exciting edition, topic of interest series, hosted by another than my own personal company, CEO of the Torah Watchman Show International, a 501c3 non-for-profit company that's set up in my heart and my soul before the Lord my God to give charitable contribution to needy Jews and B'nai Noach around the world. Hope everyone's been well. Well, I have a short video here for you, and something that just occurred to me. Believe it or not, it came from a Talmud tractate informational email. I signed up for these just to broaden my knowledge and understanding, not to be so biased against rabbinates, and just understand that some of our rabbis and sages of blessed memory were wiser than some Jews are today. It just is what it is. But one of my favorite stories, I would say, as a preteen, was the story of the great prophet Ezekiel, and I just could not get enough of that. He's my favorite prophet, and I read it about his visions, his inspirations. He was carried away in the land of Babylon with his protege, Prophet Daniel, young men that went there, born in Jerusalem, but carried away in Babylon to spend the rest of their days there. The prophet Ezekiel lived, about 600 BCE, before Common Era. Very tumultuous time for the Jewish people, ripped away from their lives they've known for many, many generations in Judea and carried off by King Nebuchadnezzar II. But the most prolific story and account in Ezekiel, and there's many, many, many great, delicious visions there. It's a story of the Valley of the Dry Bones. You probably heard about it. If you're a Christian, I know you probably heard about it. It's a famous Bible story. Many people have different elaborations, interpretations of what it means. Of course, in Judaism, it's very important to understand what it means and how we apply it. The sages who wrote the Babylonian Talmud and Jerusalem Talmud and other sacred writings talked about it, tried to attempt to understand what it means. But I'm going to read to you a transcript I've prepared for you this evening to keep my focus here on something very important. We're talking about the resurrection of the dead. Why? Because this is what the Valley of Dry Bones, by group consensus, what he's trying to talk about. Now, the word resurrection of the dead is known as Tehilliat Hameitim in Hebrew. It is a core doctrine of traditional Jewish theology, both in rabbinates and Karaite circles too. The so-called Ramban's 13 fundamental Jewish beliefs that defines us as Jews versus something else. And of course, there are 10 codified fundamental Jewish beliefs that are essentially the same as the 13, but they're more direct and not so ambiguous. But between Karaite and Rabbinate Jews, we all believe in the end of days, and we believe in the coming of the great prince, of the servant of David, king over an entire world, yet revealed in our time, may come quickly. But we all believe in these things together. One of the few things we don't argue about. Traditional Jews, and means observant Jews, going way back, believe that during the Messianic Age, the temple would be built in Jerusalem. Why? Because the exact detailed blueprints are in the book of Ezekiel. So the Jewish people are ingathered from the far corners of the earth, and the bodies of the dead will be brought back to life and reunited with their nefesh Yehudi, the souls. There'll be unification between the remains of their bodies, their corporal remains. It says, when we die, we were created from dust, we're created from clay, we return to that, right? But this is talking about the reconstitution of something that was dead and gone and never believed to be reconstituted again, because most scientists believe when you're dead, and there's nothing else. Especially atheists don't believe there's anything after that, right? But the Jewish people, definitely, their hope, their hatikva per se, the hope of Israel, is that there's a better life ahead of us than the life we're living today. And based on our legacy and choices, we have either a positive outcome or not so positive or negative outcome. Now, the Jews in the diaspora, this is a call to everyone living in the diaspora, including me in the United States of America. In Ezekiel chapter 37, the reports that the prophet had a night vision, a vision of a valley filled with dry bone, human bones, okay? Envision this, a mass killing field per se. Say back in ancient days, 1,000 years ago, when a huge army was decimated by competing army, well, their bodies were laid to waste, and they just decayed and had carrion and everything else, and fortune feeding upon them, and the decomposition of the human body, and just laying there unburied. And the bones are just laying there. You've heard about elephant graveyards, the same kind of thing. But you have just thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, not a million or more of Jewish corpses there, nothing left but skeletons, broken bones, and pieces just laying and littering out in the field, almost like, a million white stones or something, if you could picture that. Yehowah God commands Ezekiel to prophesy over the bones, which immediately reassemble. It was a step-by-step process. I'm not going to read all this, but essentially, God said, this will happen, but I want you, Ezekiel, my servant, son of man, he actually referred to him as son of man, I want you to prophesy toward these bones that you see in your vision, and I want you to cause them to animate. And you imagine Ezekiel has seen a lot of strange things, like in the River of Kabar, when God revealed himself to him in the most supernatural, ecstatic experience in the entire Jewish Bible, by far. Even some rabbis were just so disturbed about the Kabbalistic nature that I thought it was too complex and too metaphysical that most Jews could understand. And they almost left out the book of Ezekiel because they thought it was so strange and bizarre. When God described what was happening step by step, first he saw the skeletons, broken, leg bone, femur, and all this disconnected from other parts of the skeleton. It's probably thousands of skulls with missing body parts and things like that, but he saw them assembling together. I mean, you can imagine the sound of this, the sound the bones make, if you click them together and all this, you can see all this happening. So every time God made an announcement, gave a task or command to Ezekiel, this is going to happen. Now I want you to prophesy the next step. And every time Ezekiel obeyed the commandment of Yehowah God and prophesied, this will happen. Because when you say prophecy, you mean a futuristic event, the day of the future compared to the time in Babylonia when he was there around 600 or so BCE. So it's declaring that people who are dead and gone with no souls, they're actually very similar to the golem that God created Adam initially in the Garden of Eden, until God breathed in the Nefesh Yehudi through his nostrils, like blowing a shofar, a loud sound, breathing that soul into that frame of that body, and then was animated. This is what happened. So you saw all these reconstituted skeletons with sinew and tissue and organs and faces and eyes and ears and beards or whatever, men and women, almost a huge army of people. And it actually uses the word army. So maybe this was the great army that perished long ago, that they were fighting to the death and trying to defend their family, but lost the battle. Who knows? Maybe these were warriors or Jews or from multiple wars in the past that perished in battle. Who knows? But it's interesting, the words here for army is very, very interesting, because maybe they were rebuilt and reconstituted, resurrected to fight another war in the land of Israel. So bear with me. So they were not animated at first until God breathed in the Nefesh Yehudi to them. Then they started taking a breath, and the eyes started moving and blinking like I am doing, okay? So God was saying, prophesy to them, you are to go to the land of Israel. You're going to rebuild what was lost from you, taken from you. Almost like the 6 million that were perished in the Holocaust, so terrific, or the thousands of people that were murdered in the October 7th modern Holocaust event in 2023, and those bodies just burned. It was not even recognizable anymore. I mean, sometimes all you have is dental records and things like this, and can imagine all of this, all these broken pieces of bone and coming together, and then you don't know what their deity was, but now you know who they were. And maybe some of these people that were animated, maybe they knew one another, maybe they started talking. But this is a vision of the future, that's something that will happen. You don't know if this is all metaphorical or symbology or not a literal thing. That's still open to debate among rabbis and Hakam and Jews, both Karaite and rabbinates to this day. So it's open to speculation if this is a literal event about the resurrection of the dead, which is very ambiguous, anomalous, and it's not straightforward like a lot of people like to see. God said proudly to Ezekiel, prophesy. And he said, therefore, and say to them, thus saith Yehowah Elohim, your God, I'm going to open your graves and lift you out of the graves, O my people, and bring you to the land of Israel. Now, this is an English translation, it's word for word, but it's fairly accurate as the original Hebrew. This is in the book of Ezekiel again, chapter 37, verses 11 through 12. But the entire passage here is actually from verses 1 to 14. So think about what I just read you. Now, the prophet Daniel is very popular for many things, like the four beasts and things of that nature, referring to the rise and fall of four great empires and kingdoms, was inspired to write chapter 12, verse 2, and it said that in the future, that the Jewish people, even as dust, who are sleeping, will awaken again and live. That verse right there was very direct. And when you add that up to what I just read you in Ezekiel in chapter 37, verse 11 and 12, this is what the Ramban actually used as the final statement there in his 13 fundamental beliefs in the resurrection of dead. Even Ramban, a scientist, individual, a medical doctor, believed in the empirical method of measurement, and if you can't hold it, it's not intangible, that kind of thing. He actually believed this by his research and writing it in his Mishnah Torah. Now, in context, the prophet's message is abundantly clear. Just as the bones in the valley were brought back to life, so too will Israel be revived from destruction and restored to its land. Folks, this happened in 1948 when Israel came from the ruins and ashes of Nazi Europe, and then the survivors and their children moved to Israel and resettled in the United Nations, the League of Nations, those organizations there in the United States and even Russians recognized Israel's right to exist in a small parchment of land. So this actually was a fulfillment in direct prophecy. So you can look at what I read for you in Ezekiel, okay? You could say maybe this prophecy of dry bones has already occurred closer in our time in 1948. I mean, people that had no life, had no future, were allowed to build a future of their own hands, their own sweat of their brow, both women and children, and men working together, and farming and everything else, trying to reconstitute the desolate land. Mark Twain went to Israel in his time, and he said it was absolute desolation there. Nothing was growing. The only hope that Israel has is when Jews come there and then they grow agriculture and they raise cattle and sheep and build things that is lasting. Now Israel is totally transformed. It has oases there. It has desalination plants. It has water in the Negev, and they actually grow wheat and barley and wonderful things there as well. They have great produce, especially if it rains in the winter. It's a message of political rehabilitation too, because the thing is that politics aside, Am Israel High, we're all Jews in the end of the day, and that we don't allow politics to get in the way of us. It doesn't matter you're left, right, or in the middle somewhere, or indifferent. It doesn't matter. That we leave our politics aside for the greater needs of Israel and our fellow Jew. The rabbis, however, were divided about whether this also refers to individual resurrection of the world to come, that's known in Hebrew as Olam Haba. So, and conclusion, what can you just say from what everything I've just read to you? Again, many people have heard about the prophecy, very popular, prolific prophecy that most everyone has heard about is the Valley of Dry Bones. It could mean different things. It could be simply a symbol of hope for Israel. You lost everything. In fact, some of the verses that I did not read, they're actually these in a vision, these Jews that were resurrected were talking and said, we were cut off from the land. We had nothing. What are we supposed to do? And God said, you will go to Israel and you will establish a land. This is exactly what the survivors of the horrible Holocaust are doing. Even the survivors of October 7, 2023, that's what they're doing now. But it also could mean in the end of days, the days of the Mashiach, the Nasi, the prince, the great prince you read about in Ezekiel, when he comes, there's also an opportunity there for more resurrection of the dead. That kind of thing could be very little too. So it's up to your interpretation. We know that it was important enough for God to mention this, or we would not be talking about today. It's generationally important for them back then to give them hope in future. Listen, many Jews were slaughtered when King Nebuchadnezzar II destroyed Jerusalem, when the evil Judean kings there resisted his soldiers. The Edomites came in with their swords and just slaughtered people. There was the famine in the land. People were starving to death, that kind of thing. You can imagine the kind of hope these people needed for a future in which their loved ones that they saw murdered before their eyes could have a hope for a new life, risen from the dead, and living to glorify God, and finishing out that legacy, the story of their legacy and their journey, in a way that was denied for them before. I like to think about that. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. Hakam Yehowah ben-Emmett signing again to the next time. Shalom Aleichem. I want to instill hope within you, Jew and Gentile. I encourage you, Christians or the Noach, if you're watching this video, I hope you are. Hopefully we can put politics aside, religious dogma aside, all this stuff. We argue between Christians and Jews and Muslims and everything else, and just know there's hope in a God that never cheats us. He never steals from us. He never lies, and he certainly does not call any prophet to lie to disgrace himself. Ezekiel only could speak the truth because the God of truth, the Emmett, could only speak the truth too. Take care.
If you've enjoyed this program, please click like and subscribe.